Hey there, everyone. I'm Jason Logston. I'm going to double check to make sure we pop up live on Facebook. I know if I don't check, it won't go. There we are. Hey, we are live. I'm Jason Logston, and this is Making Bacon, all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. Today's episode is brought to you by the International Sous Vide Association. The ISVA just wrapped its 2020 virtual summit with more than 250 attendees and 35 sessions. They're currently starting to plan their 2021 conference and are looking for some great bloggers to work with, both as affiliates and as volunteers leading up to the conference. They offer commissions of 30% for all ticket sales and have access to many of the biggest names in sous vide. I'm on the board and the president of the ISVA, so it's fun to work with me. We have a good time. We give each other a hard time and, talk to some of our idols in cooking. So if you're interested, go to the isva.org/affiliate. It's a really great time meeting everyone, just kind of hanging out and talking about food the whole time. On to the show. So running a blog can be a full-time business, and so can managing social media, finding sponsorships, editing videos, taking photographs, and pretty much everything else we have to do. So how can you get it all done? By hiring the right people. But it's a really intimidating process, and today's guest is the perfect person to show us how it is done. She helps bloggers and creative entrepreneurs expand and improve their teams with talented freelancers. Her number one goal is to align the right person with the right role, so business owners and freelancers alike feel empowered to work within their individual skill sets and their strengths. After years of struggling to bring on quality freelancers in her own business, she figured there had to be a better way to find great support. Through a lot of trial and error, she learned that hiring freelancers for online businesses is a lot different than traditional corporate hiring strategies. She's spent years refining her strategic hiring process that has allowed her to connect hundreds of knockout freelancers with online entrepreneurs. She also teaches her hiring methods inside her self-guided digital course, The Hiring Fix. I can't wait to learn from today's guest, Emily Perron from The Hiring Fix and emilyperron.com. Emily, welcome to Making Bacon.
Hi, Jason. It's great to be here. Thank you.
I can't wait to dive into hiring and growing your team. I think it's something that a lot of bloggers talk about, and it's really important. But before we get started, I always like to ask, what is it like around your dinner table on a typical day?
Oh, this is a great question. So my husband and I just had our first baby earlier this spring in March. And
Congratulations.
Thanks. We typically eat at our kitchen island, and he is just starting to sit in his high chair. It's one of those clip-ons. He doesn't actually eat food, but he loves to watch us and play with the toy. And that's what it looks like. It's so fun. We love it.
What's his favorite toy?
He's really into this ball that has lots of things for his hands to hold on to.
I like that too, generally. You had mentioned when we were talking earlier that your first time helping with the hiring process was for your junior high principal. And you don't want to know why I was sent to the principal's office in junior high. How did that come about for you?
Yeah, how did that happen? I think I was just a kid. And they asked me, I was involved, I was involved in activities and student groups and stuff like that. So I was just always seen as a leader within the classroom. And, I just had a good reputation with the administration and the teachers in my school. And so they asked me to be on this student committee. And yeah, isn't that funny? I was 14. I was like, oh. No wonder I was destined to help people hire.
Do you have a list of all the hard hitting questions you were going to ask?
No, I remember we were just asked for our perspective as kids, as students. So I wish I had a list, but it would be funny to see what we talked about or what we asked.
I love that process of just a bunch of junior high kids, grilling and getting their thoughts on someone that's going to be basically have control over 8 hours a day of their lives for the next few years.
Yeah, and they had we met with 3 or 4 candidates.
Wow.
And they actually listened to us. It was really actually quite brilliant to have student involvement, to have the people that this person is going to serve very directly involved is really cool. Very forward thinking of them. It was not.
I was going to say, I've worked for companies that didn't let the employees they're going to be managing, interview them, much less the schools I went to.
Right. Yeah. This was like, mid 90s. So a while ago.
We have Mike Lashardy joining us. He's with the ISVA as well. He says his kid loves bathing herself in her food currently, especially mac and cheese. So you have that to look forward to, Emily.
It is in our future. I know.
So talking about hiring, I think it's always hard to know when you need help. There's this fine line between I'm really busy and I really need help from another person. When does a blogger or anyone know that it's time to hire someone and kind of make that jump?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big indicators is really around missing out on opportunities. So, you have all these things that you're doing. There's so much on your plate. It's so full. And then you want to reach out to brand partners. You want to maybe do some like really cool collaborations, or maybe you even just want to post more times a week. Maybe you want to publish a few more blog posts a week or do a little more social media, but like you're at capacity. And so that's when it really starts to become time to outsource those pieces. And then
That makes sense.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just finish your thought. I think we're on like a 2-second delay. I'm not talking over you on purpose.
Right. Sorry about that. So no, I was just sort of going to say that there's also a couple more indicators as well in terms of like, are you really ready to take this leap? And I think one of them is that you're ready to give up control is a big piece. Like you have to have this attitude of done is better than perfect. So I've had private clients, food bloggers, who, they consider themselves a perfectionist or controlling. And I've seen it go both ways. The ones who have that attitude of done is better than perfect, like having, the Pinterest descriptions updated instead of not updated, because like there's that, as long as it's like 80% good, then like you have that attitude of that letting go of control. And then the other side of it is the clarity of the role too. Like we need to know like what are you looking for? Like, what do you want them to do? And then who are you looking for?
That makes a lot of sense. The concept of like, if you want something done your way, you should probably do it. And if you want something done good in a good manner, then you can probably have someone else help you with it. But if you need it done exactly like you always do it, it's going to be hard to find someone that's exactly like you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I know you can hire people to do just about anything. What do you think the key roles that most bloggers or small business owners should start looking to fill first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's kind of like a structure that I've seen a lot of food bloggers work toward. And it really ultimately depends on the individual blogger. So first looking at what are your strengths and your skills and your talents and like those things that make you come alive. So you need to be really clear about that stuff because that's the stuff you should keep in, like you should do that as long as you can, as long as it lights you up. So once you know that, then you can start putting the other roles in place that complement that. And so a few roles are writer is a big one. So someone to actually write social media captions, write Pinterest descriptions, write the blog post itself. That's a big one. So someone who can actually write. And then a project manager is also another position that's really great because then it's a good early hire because they can help you get the systems and processes in place so that you're more successful as your team grows, because as you bring people on, you have things documented, how you want to do them, what you expect. They can look through those things, and they can also just keep you more organized. They can help you. They can also just help make sure that everything is getting done that needs to be done. They're checking in with your other freelancers on your behalf. Especially if managing isn't your favorite part, like this would be a great role to get on. The third one is social media as well. So that's another common one. Some people love it, hate it, got to do it. So social media manager is another really popular one.
I like the concept of looking for basically a project manager because especially when you start bringing on new people, you have to manage them and keep track of them. And I feel like depending on what that first person does, it's almost the same amount of work as what you're putting into it. Or if you spend that time on a project manager, then it'll be easier and easier to add people to your team because you can kind of offload it on them and they already know how you work.
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly.
And looking at, I love your concept of looking at what lights you up, what you really love to do. That's something that I've been spending a lot of time focusing on. What projects am I working on that I get done doing them? I'm like, that was great. And which ones do I get done doing? Like, I just want to crawl into bed now for a few hours, and trying to eliminate those from my plate. And then it frees up so much more energy. And I've been getting so much more done once I've started to eliminate some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you familiar with the zone of genius concept? Have you heard that floating around?
Yeah, why don't you explain that for those that haven't heard? But I think that's a wonderful thing, especially when you're talking about outsourcing.
Yeah. So when I work with my clients and even, the students in my program as well, I'm helping them craft their zone of genius so they're really clear around it. It really is that, like, what makes you come alive. And I believe the concept comes from Gay Hendricks. He had a book called The Big Leap, and that's where this originated. But it's that there's 4 levels, and at the bottom is incompetence. So this is stuff you're not good at. And then competence is the stuff you can do. And I think this is like a big trap for food bloggers, because as entrepreneurs, they tend to be generalists. And so they can do a lot of things, at varying levels of skill. But when you're a blogger, like, you just got to get it done. You have to just, like, get stuff out. And so you're capable of a lot. But then the freelancers on the other side are more specialist. So, they go deep. And so then you can line your team up into their zones of genius, it makes the whole team so much more high performing. And then I'm skipping over excellence. That's that 3rd level. Excellence is like the stuff you're really good at, but it's not quite that, like, it doesn't quite energize you. You're really good at it, but it doesn't have that, like, same level of excitement and energy and aliveness that zone of genius does.
I like that. I think it's Michael Hyatt talks about in Free to Focus. He has the similar concept that it's things that it's like your skill, and then it's your desire. So just because you're good at something, if you don't like it, it's probably something you should look at eliminating, because, and he said those are the hardest ones, in some ways, like what you're saying, that you're more than adequate at doing this, but you don't enjoy it, where if it's something that you stink at doing and you hate, it's pretty easy to be like, I will either not do this or have someone else do it.
Yeah, you're right. And that's probably, like, going back to the control issue, that's probably even, like, those are the hardest things to outsource then. It's stuff that you're really good at, but you don't like doing. So it's hard to give up that control on those items.
I've never thought about it like that. That definitely makes a lot of sense, that you're like, I can do it better than what the person I'm hiring to do is. And it's hard to keep in mind, like, but that doesn't matter. And if you're a food blogger, maybe writing those, like, Pinterest descriptions or the social media descriptions, 80% as good of what you were doing is completely fine, because people are coming to you for your recipes and your insight and your unique take on it. So focus on that. And the other stuff being 80% as good isn't going to actually hurt you in any way. And now it's freeing you up to do more stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
You had mentioned that who's in your team? You have, I assume, as someone that teaches outsourcing, that you also have assembled a team.
Yes. So I have 3 team members right now, and they're incredible. Like, I cannot believe, I mean, I call it small but mighty. And I'm serious about that, because I am amazed at what they can do. And it really is a testament to my hiring process, because that I found them towards the tail end of refining my hiring process, of course. So, the longest I have had my writer for 2 years. And I'm like, that is like ancient history in the freelance world, because there's just a lot of turnover, a lot of freedom and flexibility with freelancers. So they just can have a lot of turnover. And then, so she's number 1, the writer editor. She helps me with my blog posts and social media, just editing, sometimes writing things too, just to help fill in the gaps. And then the second is I have an online business manager, and she is, again, just incredible. Like, I had my baby and, like, COVID hit, like, everything happened. Like, I was in the hospital with this fresh newborn, and, like, all the stay-at-home orders were going into place. And, like, she just stepped in and, like, she made it seamless. Like, the content we had scheduled wasn't relevant anymore. And so she just, fixed it up and took care of things, and it was really incredible. And then she's also now managing my virtual assistant as well. So I do have a virtual assistant. who like creates my graphics. She also schedules everything. Like she's way more detail oriented and like brilliant on that stuff than I am. And I cannot like design my way out of a paper bag. So
What
like
does
my words and like putting pictures to them, and that's been so fun to watch.
what does a business manager, like an online business manager, do? Like I've heard that term, but I couldn't tell you anything that they do.
Yeah. So they really, what my business manager has done for me is she's really offloaded like the day-to-day management of the team and the business itself. So I don't like, we use Asana, for example, and I don't like go in and assign any tasks in Asana. Like she takes care of all of that. And she also listens to my priorities and helps me prioritize the projects and then stay focused on executing what we've committed to in the next 1 to 3 months. Because I don't know, a lot of entrepreneurs are this way too. Like we're big visionaries. Like we're not necessarily good at like details and execution and implementation. And so she is that, like, and she thrives on it. And I've even felt bad at times because I was like, I don't know, like I love being in the vision role and I'm like, I stink at execution. But so I would feel bad having someone like do that role. And we had a really great conversation about how like she doesn't want to have the vision. She wants to like help someone execute on their vision because she has these like management skills, like these, detail and organizational management skills that just, where did my train of thought go? I don't have. And like, that's what she wants to give. And then she wants to give that to businesses that she really cares about. So she's really selective about her clients. I mean, that the online business manager role really has to be a really tight fit. You can get away with, a schedule, social media scheduling. You don't necessarily need someone who's kind of like lockstep with your values and, you have more flexibility on some of that, but with the OBM, the online business manager, it's just different. The other thing I think about too is I think of like online business manager as kind of like the one you're kind of working up to. Most people start at a virtual assistant level. And then this is true of most OBMs as well. They start as VAs. So they're starting with like more like scheduling, organizing, detail work, calendars, emails, stuff like that. And then they move into project management. A lot of them have project management backgrounds. And then the project manager, they're just like not quite as a high level of the business manager. A lot of them could do business manager work. Again, it's just about that fit. So project managers are more just like making sure the projects are getting done. They're breaking bigger projects down. They're, even running the process. They can be very similar, but so typically then the VA is the lowest paid. A project manager is mid-tier, and then an online business manager. Online business manager is like the topper tier.
I like topper tier. That's good.
Yeah, topper tier. I don't know.
That concept of like realizing that other people enjoy what you don't, it was something that's been interesting for me as I've been working with more and more people. Like my mom does a lot of our VA type work, and we're a family company. And like, if you give her a list of recipes and a line that's like linking to an affiliate link that she needs to put in every one, like she's happy for the next 4 hours, copy and pasting it in and going through. And like, to me, that sounds miserable, but she really likes it. And it's been interesting looking at that. Just because you don't like to do something doesn't mean someone else doesn't find fulfillment and enjoyment in it. And if you can find them, they're going to enjoy working for you.
Yeah, right on. I mean, it goes back to that. That's how you then get the high performance as well, because, you're tapping into the things they really love to do. Like they get to come alive in your business and you get to come alive because you're doing what you love too.
Yeah, you're doing the energizing stuff, not that kind of the draining activities.
Yeah, and it's so weird then because like what you see as draining isn't draining to them. I mean, it's just this like, I don't know, mind warp kind of thing.
You mentioned, the VAs are the least paid, and then the project managers, and then the online manager. What can a blogger kind of expect if they have no idea of, I'm interested in hiring someone, but is it, $50 a month? Is it $5,000 a month? Where kind of is that range?
Oh yeah. So for VA, and I'm talking mostly like, freelancers based in the US is most of my reference point on this. You can pay other things in other parts of the world, but for US-based freelancers, VAs typically run from $20 to $30, $35 an hour, depending on experience. And then project managers are a little more like towards 30 to 40 an hour. And then online business managers are usually like 40 to 60 plus. I mean, again, it depends on, experience, who they've worked for in the past and how much online work that they've done. I mean, with all three of these roles, I always on behalf of my clients in particular, I'm always looking for people who've actually been freelancing for a few years at least. Like they're not like fresh out of like a more traditional job, just because we want someone who is pretty established and they already know like the virtual space. They know a lot of the programs you need, they know Later and Tailwind and Asana and Trello and Slack. And so they speak that language already. You don't have to train them up on that. And they're also able to then bring in like best practices that they've seen work in other businesses into yours as well.
Especially if it's the first person you've hired, you probably don't know the best way to work with a VA or any of these roles. And if they've worked with a lot of people, they could say this works or this doesn't work in general.
Yeah. And so when it comes to like, if it's your very first hire, you haven't brought anyone in, I would go that mid-level. I would recommend the project manager position because they can and this is actually how I found my online business manager, is she started as a project manager in my business. Oh. And then over time we built trust because again, that business manager role, like they just like know and see so much and they have so much responsibility that you kind of have to build that relationship over time. So that's worked really well for me to approach it in that way. Or to find a PM who also is doing some online business management as well.
Mike has a good question, where do you find the right people? I assume you just don't like put a flyer on the bulletin board at your local grocery store.
Right. Yeah. But this is such a good question. And it's actually one I get all the time. Everyone wants to know, like, where do I go? Like, where do I go for the good freelancers? Where do I go for the good ones?
What's the secret handshake to get into the freelancer club,
This is the big secret. The secret is really how, because you can find them anywhere. They're on LinkedIn, they're on the freelancing platforms, they're in Facebook groups. You can find them through referrals and recommendations, but really you need to have a solid process from beginning to end to because great, you get 30 people to apply, but if you don't know what to do with them, if you don't know how to narrow that group down with a more strategic hiring process, you're not going to be able to kind of I'm really losing the word here, but extrapolate who's the right one. Filter would be a good word. Yeah. How do you filter through those? And actually I'm thinking about, then I have actually a mini course that I put together that that walks you through some of this. So it starts to break down those things that you need to know in order to hire. And it gives you that kind of runway for that.
So what's an overview of some things listeners can think of, and then they can go to your course to grab some more information? And do you have a link for your course?
Oh yeah, it's emilyperron.com/mini course.
All right.
The link, and it's free right now, so you can just grab it and get going.
Make sure I grab that link. So what are some tips, like you were saying, people can start thinking of to filter or to get some of the right resumes in out of the gate as well?
Yeah. There's kind of two parts to that, right? So the first part is you got to get them, and the job posting is key. I mean, you could think about it like a blog post where you need to be hitting certain pieces of information. So one is the job title. Then you need, I like to do a general overview, that just kind of a summary of the position. Then the responsibilities, what do you actually want them to do? The third section is preferred. Yep, the third section is preferred qualifications. So who are you looking for? How much experience do they have? What kind of background do they have? And then the fourth section is actually about you. So, a lot of times companies want to, companies do this. Big companies often lead with who they are, and they don't actually care about who they're looking for as the employee. And so that, and found it works much better to focus on the freelancer first, but also to still include some stuff about you in your blog. And then the last piece is the application instructions. How do you want them to apply? When can they expect to hear from you? Just all those details go in there. So you need like this stellar format, right? It needs to be detailed enough, but not too detailed so that if you're too detailed, then no one applies. If you're not detailed enough, then no one applies. So it's kind of walking that fine line between the two.
How do you, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was like, I could go into the next section around filtering, or if you had like
yeah, perfect.
Oh, you ready for me to go in? Like, just
yeah, go. Yeah, I am curious about the job description. I think I understand how much you want to go into some detail, kind of let them know the general process, but you don't have to kind of lay out all 80, things that you want them to do. Mm-hmm. Once you get in the resumes, then how do you kind of, sift through them and figure out which ones are actually a good fit for you and which ones kind of are just.
Yeah, so I do a couple of things. The first thing I do when I have these resumes is I just give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to every candidate. So I just kind of do a gut check before I spend a ton of time with their application or their resumes and LinkedIn profiles, because I really want to protect my time and energy around that. So that's why I just do, it's like really kind of old school, like it's a yes or a no. And then sometimes I use a maybe, and then I come back when I'm done. And then I look at all of those yeses. So everyone I've given a thumbs up to, and typically I try to get to like 15, because I found that 15 is a good number to do a more in-depth review. More than that, it becomes really overwhelming. And that's why I like my super cool system. And then from there, then I start to rate the information that they've provided. So one of the key differences in my process that is pretty different than what most people are doing is I have ditched cover letters. I no longer require them. I don't ask for them. I don't want them. So instead, I ask like 3 to 5 questions, so that I get like similar information across all applications. Because with a cover letter, everyone's saying different things. It's really hard to tell them apart. So I decided to, in lieu of a cover letter, focus them in on the things that I really wanted to know about.
What's the most valuable question you think of those questions you ask?
I think it's, what is your zone of genius? Because you would be surprised how many virtual assistants I've had like write in like the funniest responses. Like sometimes I get time zones entered. Other times I've had like learning, and I'm just like, with a virtual assistant role, we're looking for detail-oriented, organized, like anything in that realm. But like creative isn't really creative or learning. So I watch for those things. Not that there's necessarily right or wrong responses, but in that kind of role, I'm looking for people to say kind of certain things.
I feel like if you're hiring, like especially in that role, you're hiring someone that is probably going to be writing some social media posts for, or like, the captions are going to be creating some even small amount of content, even if you have a full-time writer, on your staff, that you want them, when they look at an Instagram post, that they don't think like, oh, chicken salad. You want them to be, okay, I'm trying to get something across in this, just like with the question on this resume, I'm trying to get across and show something. So I should probably go into more detail about whatever it is to accomplish that, where just saying creative or learning probably isn't actually accomplishing that at all.
Right, exactly. It really shows the critical thinking skills as well. Like, are they going to take initiative and figure, like, if you've never heard of zone of genius and you're like, why are they asking me my time zone? That's a funny question. Like, Googling zone of genius is brilliant. And I've had tons of candidates say like, I'm new to this concept. I looked it up. Like, this is what I think. And I just think that's really cool too. Like, that shows a lot of initiative and just like a lot of good skills. Like you want, like, they're going to be high performing if they do stuff like that.
I feel like that's almost more valuable than someone writing in and saying like, oh, here's my zone of genius. Like someone that saw it, didn't know what it was, did the research and then fill it in. You're like, that's what I want, is someone that will be going the extra mile to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my number one question. I ask it every single time. Some of the others vary, but based on the role, but that one is long standing.
Have any of your questions changed? Like, did you have any that you're like, this is a great question, and everything you got back, you're just like, this actually is not helping me at all?
It's actually more that I was missing a question. So I didn't always provide space for, like in my own business, I didn't provide space for them to talk about why they loved my business and why they were interested in working for me. So this was even back a couple years when I was still career coaching, and I was doing a lot of work around meaningful work. And I was hiring a writer, and I just had like all of the applications just like went on and on and on about like how much meaningful work meant to them. And it was at that moment that I was like, oh, we need a space. And the same thing can happen with the food bloggers too. And sometimes people still do it, but I always leave the last question to be a little bit more personal in nature. So I always recommend that food bloggers ask something like, what's your favorite food to cook, bake, or eat? And so it's just a more of a fun question. But if you don't ask that, they can spend their entire application talking about how much they love food. But like, seriously, like, everyone loves food, and anyone applying to work for a food blog is going to love food. Like, you're just going to have that in common. Like, if you hate cooking, like, why would, like, a freelancer just wouldn't apply for a job, you know, working with a food blog if they really hate food or don't like cooking or baking or bad at it, stuff like that.
How much is personality or beliefs, how much does that go into whether or not you hire someone? And it probably depends on the role, but how much do they have to be in line with, you know, your beliefs or your personality or click with you if they're doing things that, you know, personality might not show as much?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I actually look for compliments a lot more, because if we get too similar, then we end up having also like similar strengths and weaknesses. I mean, even within personality types, this happens. So I did this once with a writer where we had the same personality type, and we had like problems getting things done because we were both not very reliable or detail oriented when it came to like tiny tasks that don't really matter all that much. And so, yeah, so I actually think it's better to have more diversity on your team in terms of, in terms of so many ways, because it just strengthens you overall, because you have people with different perspectives then that can bring different things.
That makes sense. With my work in the ISVA, I work with Mike, and Mike is very much, he takes things differently and approaches them differently than I do. And it's, we have this thing that we know that just because I say no doesn't mean long-term no, and vice versa. And so we've had multiple times that one of us will keep bringing something up over and over, you know, over 6 months. And then at some point it clicks for the other one, and we see it in our lens. We're like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. Let's do that. And it was discounted right away by us, but over that time, and because of the other point of view, it's allowed us to do interesting things that we never would have done as an organization.
Yeah, and I think it also helps with our blind spots as well. Like, you know, we have our own perspective, and we can only see so much. And so by having people with like different backgrounds and even different personalities and different strengths and weaknesses, it just helps open you up to some of those ideas, right? Like, you just become a stronger, better business by doing that.
Mike says it works great. Usually Jason changes my mind. You have good ideas too, Mike, every once in a while. This sounds obvious, but a lot of people forget that hiring someone is really just the start of the process. How can you integrate someone? You found a good person that you think is a good fit. How can you get them going as seamlessly as possible?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's a couple of things you can do. I think first is, you know, sharing how you do things. So, you know, using some kind of screen capture is a great way to like start getting your standard processes recorded somewhere so that they can see how you're doing it, especially like things like setting up a blog post. Like, there's a certain number of steps that you're following for that stuff. And so just recording you doing it is really helpful. I like Loom personally, because you can pause the recording, and then if you have to like do something, then you can come back and record again and just like pick it up from where you were. So that's been really, really nice. And then I think on the softer side of it is really what I call a feedback loop. So when you hire, you're shifting from doing to managing. And by doing that, when we create a feedback loop, we have to like stop implementing the changes we want to see, and we have to start communicating them. And it may even sound obvious, but it's just something I think we often forget, or we forget how much time that takes. Like, we think it'll be faster if I just fix this tiny thing. But the disservice we're doing in the long run is we're not giving that freelancer the chance to like learn what we want and what we don't want. And they are craving feedback. Like, they want to do well. They want to perform really well for you. And if we don't give any feedback, they don't, yeah, they just don't learn. And so I call it a feedback loop, because what I like to do is I give the feedback and then I let them implement. I do not touch it. And then I go back and check in, and not in like a micromanagement sense, but more, I want to make sure that my communication got through correctly or appropriately, like that they understood what I said. Because sometimes, like, if I'm doing it in an email, it might be harder to like really like catch what I meant. And so there might have just been like a miss on it. That could have been my fault too. So
Yeah, it's interesting how rarely we communicate as well as we think that we did. Once you start working with other people, you're like, I am not nearly as good at communicating as I thought that I was.
which is actually why I use a lot of voice messages. Like, I use Voxer and send my freelancers the link to the Voxer message so that they can actually hear my voice. Because if I just wrote it out, it takes a lot more time for me to like write out an email that is, kind and, has like good tone and all of that, and like spelling and grammar and all, it's just a lot. So instead I can just do like a 2-minute audio. It's way faster, and just shoot it over to them and they listen, and then they can adjust and let me know.
I like the idea of doing those videos and audios I feel like it also adds a little bit more human contact and, gets your personality behind it a little bit more. And they feel like they're not just getting emails from a random, account out there.
Yeah, exactly. My writer, Audrey, she loves my audio notes, and she's always like, Emily, I feel like we're so caught up, even though like we haven't actually physically talked in like maybe 4 to 6 weeks, but because she gets my audio notes, she just like feels like she knows what's going on, and we're super well connected. So, and again, like, it's a really low energy way of, like, it doesn't take me a lot to do that, and I'm, getting big benefits from it.
Mike asks, if it doesn't work out, what is your process for letting people go? That makes me worried, since I work with Mike. He might be looking at kicking me to the curb, but.
Let's see. So there's a few things that I do, and like more like in the nuts and bolts way, I guess, is that, I first look at what they have access to. So if I know it's like for sure not working out, and like we've tried everything, I've given feedback, I've given some chances, like I've given space and time to build trust, and it's just not the right fit. I turn off all their access to everything they have before I let them know. And then I also will then just communicate that, like, I thank them for their time, and I let them know it's just not working out for me right now, but, I'll keep them in mind for the future. Or, I try to be kind, and usually they know it's coming. Like, usually it's pretty mutual. I've done it over phone. You don't always have to do it on a meeting. Like, you can just be an email, especially if this is not someone you want to like maintain a super good relationship with. An email is fine. And again, like, I've also done audio notes. Like, I've done it all the ways, but not text message. I've never texted.
That just crosses the line.
Yeah, it's nice. Like, oftentimes, well, and this is the other thing too. Oftentimes, the freelancers might be like, they're probably feeling it's not the best fit either, but it's so much harder for them to like turn down the income. Like, it's way harder for them to fire a client, because like you're the one paying them. And so they don't want to say no to money, but then like in the long run, I often remind myself, like, this is the best for both of us. If it's not the right fit anymore, or maybe I like picked the wrong person and I knew within a few weeks, it's just best to let them go.
I feel like it's always hard as the boss, for lack of a better term. I did freelance consulting as a programmer for about 15 years. And more than once, I've been like let go from a job and just thought, oh, thank goodness. Like, this was a disaster, like partnership. Like, I'm so glad they let go of me. But again, I wasn't going to, turn down a job that was currently paying me. It's a lot harder to do that than it is to let go of an employee in a lot of cases.
Yeah, exactly. You've been there.
What tools for like communication across all these different roles, what tools do you recommend that bloggers should look into to either manage or track to-dos, track processes? What do you use to kind of communicate with your team across all these various things?
Yeah, so I recommend for food bloggers, and this is what I do in my own business, is to use a project management tool. So I use Asana, but there's lots out there. I love Asana. I love what they've done the last few years. The way they've built it out is just, it's so much more robust, and it's just, I love it. And so what we do is we keep, as much as possible, we keep all of the communication in Asana. So there's very few emails, and we don't even use Slack. I don't do a lot of texting. I will use Voxer. I have like actual Voxer accounts with one of my freelancers, but for the most part, I like to keep even those. Like I'll link, like I put the link into Asana to the Voxer message so that we all know where to go. Like, so September blog posts, everything for September is in one place. We all are going to the same reference point. And then of course I love, Google Drive, the Google Docs feature and Google Sheets. They're just, it's the best. So I integrate those two pieces. So we're always linking out to the Google Drive itself. And that's pretty well organized as well. But
what's the hardest part to kind of communicate and keep track of across the roles? So some things I feel like are very easy and other things tend to fall through the cracks a lot.
Yeah. Say more about that. What do you mean? What do you mean?
So like one of the things we struggle with is ongoing processes and kind of keeping track of where they are in that process, or things that we might do once a month and forgetting that when it's coming up for that month, that it's time to start looking into that, or now it's like 3 days away. So some things like that we've struggled with, where something that happens every week is easy to keep track of, and one-off projects we generally have no problem keeping track of because they're assigned and then they come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's more of that monthly is a gap, like a little more of a gap, or like the quarterly, the less often.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've started implementing in my own business with my business manager is she sometimes gives me like preview times. So if I'm supposed to be working on October blog content, I have like a task, like, a few weeks before my initial drafts are due, like I'll have a task for working on it. So it just like keeps it in my view so that I know like this is coming up. I need to do, October blog posts are due by September 1st or whatever it is. And that's one way I use it. And again, I use it in the Asana so I can give it like a weekly deadline. We kind of like put them out in advance so that we're getting these notifications and remembering to work on it, that it's coming up.
So it's like is basically someone's task is to remember that this task, and probably I assume more than one task, but various tasks are coming up, and it's their role to keep track of those and let the proper person know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the business manager, or like the brilliance of having either a business manager or a project manager, is that's actually their job, is to be looking ahead at that stuff and noticing like, okay, what's coming up. And then also knowing like you and your other team members as well. Like, so knowing some of your big strengths and weaknesses so that they can like build it around you. I feel like we're gaming Asana like all the time. Like ultimately, like I wouldn't be on an editorial calendar at all. I would just be like off in my own world creating stuff, and then like whenever it needs to be done, then we just get it done. So, like,
yeah, I'm definitely
on the calendar. I don't want any deadlines.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with that type of stuff in general. I love coming up with the ideas, and I enjoy executing at a kind of low level a lot of the ideas, but everything in between is not in my wheelhouse for a lot of cases.
Yeah, so that's what I'm working towards. Like that's right now my next vision for my team is getting to that level. I'm not quite there yet, but we're like making steps and trying to get more ahead of things so that we have like more of a backlog of the fresh content. So there's time, because that's one of the challenges too with a team is you need more of a run. You need much more of a runway. Like the feedback loop we talked about, like that takes time. Like you can't like you can't like outsource a blog post writing and expect to publish it the next day. Like they're going to need time to like do a little research and like check into the SEO and get the keywords right, and then the time it takes to actually write the post.
That makes sense. The more communication that has to go around things, it's going to take that much longer to get everything done, but hopefully less time for you to actually have to spend on any of the tasks, even though it takes longer total hours, right?
Yeah, and in the long run, it gets faster and faster, right? So like as you build trust with your freelancer, they're just you get this natural shorthand where it just becomes easier and easier. They know what you expect. So you've given feedback in the past, and they're accounting for that. So they're doing more of what you want and less of what you don't, and they're adjusting as they go, and until you're in like a pretty good rhythm.
You talked about that most of your experiences with hiring freelancers that are in the US. Is there a reason you focus on people in the US versus ones overseas? Have you run into issues? What's kind of your thought process behind that?
Yeah, so I think I think it's a couple things. I think one, I just don't I guess I get like kind of questionable about some of the rates that are being charged. Like, I don't know if that's really a livable wage for that part of the world. I think that's been, because sometimes people are like, you can get a VA for $1, an hour or $5 a day. And I'm like, just like given my own sensibilities or like my own perspective. The other thing I like is I like having my freelancers on a similar time zone as me. And so I have a hard time if like I have to wait overnight to get something. Like, it's just really slow turnaround. Or like if there is a miscommunication, then it's like you're waiting a whole nother day to get it back. And then I also personally had a pretty bad experience with someone in Bangladesh, but it was just like a strange experience on Fiverr. And I think part of it was I didn't know what I was doing. And so there was also like some cultural barriers as well, like in terms of communication, where our communication styles were really different. And so it was hard to manage that piece. So
I feel like
it's not bad or wrong or anything. There's just different approaches, and that's just why I've kind of stayed more US based since then. And some of those were like my early experiences too. So
I feel like your comment there about communication style is really important, where we talked earlier about having kind of a different approach to things and thinking about things differently can be really good because you can complement each other. I do think that communication style needs to at least have some overlap in the middle where you can still effectively communicate. Because I have worked with people and companies that the way that they communicate is different than the way that I communicate, and it was constantly leading to kind of miscommunication.
mhm.
Where do you view a lot of these roles, especially as a blogger? There's very few things that are kind of bringing like money in directly to us. So as a blogger, how do you kind of decide on the cost benefit for some of these roles? Like, is it worth the money? Do I have the money now, like knowing it's going to free up my time, but will I be able to, bring enough money in during that time to kind of pay for them? How do you go about those kind of calculations?
Yeah. Well, one way I think to think about it is to think about like your worth and like if it's going to free you up to work for a brand that's maybe like, let's say it's a $10,000 contract, but you're outsourcing, social media at $30 an hour, a few hours a week. If it's freeing you up that much, like, would you want to be paid that? Does that make sense? This is not making
Mhm.
sense at
I think I understand what you're saying, that it's people talk about this when you're doing sponsored post work or when you're doing content creation, that you should, as a blogger, we should have an idea in our head of what we're worth. And that could be $5 an hour if you're just getting started. It could be
all.
$500 an hour if you're established and, doing a lot of work. And then if you have that value, then it's easier to say, this freelancer is freeing me up this amount of time. So if I'm paying less than this, then it's a worthwhile investment. Is that
Yeah.
kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the great thing with freelancers too is you can scale them up and down depending on your revenue as well. So like, let's say you have like a little bit of a dip or something is going on. You could ask them to like just cut back their hours a couple hours a week, or maybe cut them in half without totally losing all of your support. Or, maybe the reverse is true. You have some like extra brand work that's come in, and now you need like a little more support to get that stuff done and out the door. So I think that's one of the nice things with freelancers versus employees, where they're more like static and you have certain expectations for what you provide. The freelancers don't have those same expectations. They expect things to ebb and flow. They expect flexibility, in exchange for they have a lot more freedom. They have freedom of, which clients they take, and they have freedom of what kind of work and projects they take, kind of work and projects they do as well.
So if people want more information about freelancers, you've shared so much great knowledge, and I'm excited to kind of dive into some of our processes and how we work with freelancers. If someone wants more information, you have the 5 things no one tells you about hiring freelancers mini course, and then you also have a more comprehensive self-paced course, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. So the Hiring Fix is the self-guided course. And I've taken a ton of online courses. And so I felt like I infused everything that I loved and like nothing that I didn't like about online courses. So this one, it really breaks down that hiring process into tiny, tiny steps. So a lot of the videos are just 5 minutes, and then you like have your activity. Like then it's like, okay, go do that part of the process. Or like, I like give a comprehensive review of, lots of tips around like filtering through those candidates. We go even deeper in that course. And then it's like, okay, now you take that and you go apply it. So it's designed so it's really a step-by-step guide. Throughout the whole process. And then I also include, like, I review the job postings as well. My students can send in their job postings and, get an actual like personal review to make sure that they've got what they need. There's templates, there, swipe files. So you don't have to start from scratch. You get like stuff that you can start and edit and stuff that's actually been used. Like this is exact language that I've used in job postings that you're getting in there. So
I think that like personal feedback is so critical that we learn a lot, but it's to execute, it's really hard. And having someone come in and say, oh, you did this 80% right, but this 20% might be minor things, but it's going to throw off kind of the whole feel of everything.
Yeah, and really that job posting is the most crucial element. Like they have to be super attractive, and they like the formula I've used. I've been testing it for 5 years now, and it's just like it's perfect. Like it is perfect. I get like 40 to 60 people every time I post a job. I mean, the numbers to me are insane. I think my highest was 68 project managers. 68.
That's crazy. You have to be able to find someone good in that number.
Yeah, people want to work with you like at 68. And you're also just more likely to have like a really solid top 10 when you have that many applications. First, you get like 5 DMs on Facebook,
Once you have that job posting, where do you post the job? Where have you found to be an effective way to bring in some of these resumes?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the role. And I do get into like a ton of detail in the Hiring Fix on this, but a couple places I do like Facebook groups. I've had some good success with some in particular. And then I also like Upwork as well. I think for project managers, social media, and writers, Upwork has been really phenomenal it just like has the people looking for jobs that are hanging out there. Like they're actively looking for new projects or new clients. So that's kind of why I love them. I mean, they're looking to make money. It's a business. So there's like not too much cost to the business owner, but the freelancer pays a pretty good fee, like a percentage on what they make. So like with anything, there's pluses and minuses. And then I also really love the International Virtual Assistant Association. So IVAA, I think it's .org. They also are really good for virtual assistants. They have because people are paying to be in that membership. So they have a really nice job board that you just submit your job in, and then people reach out to you. And I've had really good quality there.
Awesome. Well, Emily, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your expertise and your knowledge. I learned a ton. Hopefully everyone listening learned a ton, and there's a good run on VAs and project managers out there in the near future.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much. This is so fun.
I had a blast. And this has been Making Bacon, all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. Till next time, I'm Jason Logston. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Emily.